In this segment, the featured teacher, Shari VanderVelde, is interviewed by Ask Group Senior Consultant Brenda Kaylor. Shari provides thoughtful and provocative responses to Brenda's reflective questions. Brief scenes from the classroom episode add visual reinforcement for Shari's comments.
Tell me how you start. How do you coach beginning teachers in terms of the world of planning?
Planning takes so much expertise, but you have to start somewhere. And Paula Rutherford's work and the work of the Dufours has been very useful to me. At Orchard Avenue, we use the ovals. And basically, the ovals are, what do we want our kids to know, understand, be able to do? We've got to start there. We've got to have that end in mind. Then we've got to be thinking about how are we going to know when they've arrived, or if they haven't arrived, as the case may be. So what are our evaluative tools going to be? What are our assessments along the way? Not just the summative assessments, but the formative assessments, the things that we do on a daily basis to help us understand if kids get it. And then, of course, what are we going to do with kids that don't get it? What are we going to do with kids that already know it? So we've got to think about all of those different levels of scaffolding for kids and all of those different differentiation kinds of tasks that are going to be at our disposal for writers' workshop, readers' workshop, whatever we're doing.
What's the secret of success in formative assessment?
Everything I'm doing in my classroom all day long leads to formative assessment. If I'm asking kids a question during a focus lesson and I'm listening for their answers, that's a formative assessment because it provides me with information about what they know or what they don't know. If they're doing a turn and talk and I'm listening in on a couple of different partnerships, I get very rich data about who understands, who doesn't, who's off topic. And so all day long as a teacher, you are gathering bits and pieces of data. Whether you write them down or not is another matter. I have to, because otherwise I forget. When I take kids writing home, when I take their book journals home, when I take their math papers home, all of those things are a form of formative assessment. And so if you wait until the end of a unit to find that stuff out, it's too late. Too many people think data involves numbers and it has to be quantitative, but data can be very qualitative. So when I'm carting home a whole pile of students' writing notebooks, that's data. Part of the data is, how many pages have they written? Are they incorporating the spelling strategies that we've been talking about? That's all data right there in my hands on my dining room table. How many kids ask questions? Is it the same kids over and over again? Are they asking the same type of question? That's another form of data. Are they getting their homework in on time? That's data. Are they getting their assignments in on time? All of it can be considered data. So everything that I'm doing in the classroom, it's assessment, it's data, it helps guide the next steps for instruction. You know what the Underground Railroad is not. It's not underground and it's not a railroad. Mm-hmm. But I noticed that you've got a little bit of a misunderstanding about what it actually is. Okay. You said it's in the forest, that it's dark and scary. I want to clarify one thing for you. The Underground Railroad is a metaphor. It's not really a thing, we know that. And what it stands for is a series of houses that go all the way from the south, all the way up to Canada.
I was watching you work with a little girl who had a misconception about the Underground Railroad. And you worked really hard with her to help her reframe her thinking about what that was. How do you keep your eyes open and ears open for misconceptions, and how do you predict where they might surface?
There's a very common misconception for a lot of kids of that age, the Underground Railroad. Well, it's underground, it's a railroad. That kind of thing is all over the place for kids, not just the Underground Railroad, but many terms like that. You just have to be alert 100% of the time. For instance, after a focus lesson, or actually as part of the focus lesson and during the active engagement part, when kids are talking or doing a turn and talk or a shoulder buddy, whatever you'd like to call it, I listen in on as many of those as I can to hear what kids are saying and if they get what I'm talking about. The same thing during conferences, or for Mallory's, for instance, I discovered her misconception when I was reading her work at home, which is something else that you have to do as a teacher, is take those piles home and make sure the bag gets into the house, not just in the car, and read that stuff and skim it quickly and see where kids are not understanding things, even when it looks like the whole class is getting it and the kids are raising their hand and giving the right answers. There's always 2 or 3 or 4, or heaven forbid, sometimes more, that don't get what we've just done. And I just have to be Johnny on the spot and go and put out those little brush fires and help kids make that little turn and figure out what we're talking about.
Let's talk about talk. There's a depth of understanding that shows itself in the talk that we listen to between you and the students and between students and students. How do you structure the classroom, or what is it that you do that ensures kids have conversations at that level?
I think that part of what makes for a rich and productive classroom is when kids talk to one another. One of the things I think that we have to do for kids, at least that I've had to do in my classroom, is to be so explicit in how you do that. Even with 4th graders, I've had to model and do little fishbowl demonstrations with kids where we get together on the floor or pull up our chairs together, and we show them how to do that, my partner and I. So, for instance, she and I might do a demonstration for all of our kids together where we show how we pull our chairs together and sit knee to knee, look each other in the eye, and start a conversation. And how do you ask thick questions as opposed to thin questions? We can do a whole unit on that and have our posters up around the room. What are good questions? How do people behave when they're listening and showing they're listening? How do you build on those comments? That is curriculum right there. It's the curriculum of talk. And so it's just like anything else. It starts slowly. So in a 1st grade classroom, it just looks like 2 kids sitting together reading a book with the book between them. By the time you get to 4th grade, you can have 3- and 4-person teams giving one another some very specific feedback, but you've had to model that for kids and be okay when it's not quite the way you'd like it to be. I can't tell you how many times I've been disappointed in the quality of talk, but that just means I need to back up and do a better job of teaching how to engage in good talk.
Let's talk about your room, your environment, the structure of what's on the walls and how you set up tables and chairs and desks and bean bags and how you set that as a learning place. How do you use the room?
The environment is crucial. I'm spending all day there, so I would like it to be comfortable and welcoming. And the kids are spending all day in there with me, so I'd like it to be comforting and comfortable and welcoming for them as well. I prefer tables because that facilitates interaction with kids, and if I can get them in my classroom, I always ask for round tables. I can put 4 kids there, they can face each other, they can put their bin of stuff underneath their chairs and have the table clear when they need to. There's got to be space to move between tables so the tables aren't too close, because otherwise you don't get a lot of independent work done, and you want to make transitions easy. There's also got to be a gathering spot. That's our community spot. That's usually the first thing I make sure I have a place for in my classroom. Where is our community spot going to be? You can have a couch or some comfortable chairs there or not, but there's got to be a place where all of us can gather together and be close. Not in chairs, not in desks, just together on the floor. And so you have to have big enough space for that. And if you don't in your classroom, you have to be able to move desks or tables quickly. Wall space. I don't know any teacher who doesn't wish they didn't have more wall space. Things go up on the walls that the kids have created together. We have charts from our writing units. I don't have enough room to keep up the charts from the previous writing units, but I wish I did, because each unit is built on the previous unit. And then we want our charts up for reading. What do good readers do? How do you choose good books? What are the things that we've been studying in our books? What are all the different themes we've looked at? We've got to have our charts up for mathematics and all the different cool things we've learned in math. And of course in science and social studies. And there's got to be a place for art. And so those displays have to be constantly rotating because there's just not enough space for them. So we've got clothes hangers, clotheslines and clothespins with stuff hanging down, and we use the hallways, and there's got to also be space for kids to meet with their groups. So sometimes I just assign that space. Your writing team will meet here, your writing team will meet here, your writing team will meet here, to facilitate that movement. but there has to be space for that as well.
What are the systems that you use to make sure it's not only a positive learning environment, but it's also a productive learning environment?
That's one of the things that is right up there on the priority list at the beginning of the year. How do you get kids transitioning quickly and effectively? Who is your paper passer if you have one? Where do kids turn in their work when they're done? All of those are things that you have to think out. So if you're a detail-oriented person, you've probably got lots of good things going on. And if you're not a detail-oriented person, that's where you need to find a teacher nearby who is. Go into their room, look at how it's done, and just take those ideas and run with them. I've done that all my life because I'm not real good with the details. But I've had teachers that work right next door to me that are extremely organized and can set up for a really great lunch count or a really great job system so the kids all know what to do, when to do it. And then you just steal those ideas away and do them in your own classroom. But a productive learning environment in general, I think that it's somewhere in between noisy and absolutely quiet. So when you walk into a room, there's probably some talking going on, but it's quiet and it's not disturbing the other kids who are doing something. You can tell when there's a useful, productive buzz and when it's way off track. It's pretty obvious. You just have to stand in the middle of your room and listen for it and watch. And I think a productive buzz is what you're going for.
I want you to think about what you know now that you wish you had known at the beginning of your career.
Everything. I think I could give you one.
All right.
And that would be the power of collaborating with teammates. I did not understand that at the beginning of my career. And in fact, I didn't get that until about 8 years ago. And it's powerful. It is really, really powerful to work with other people to make your instruction better.
In a learner-centered classroom, a place that you've been describing, what's the role of the student?
They have almost as much responsibility as I do for their learning. We create rubrics together and checklists together. They know what those are up front at the beginning of a project because they've helped develop them. And I ask them to have them out almost all the time when they're working on their writing. So they know what the outcomes are. They know what they're supposed to be doing. They know where they're headed. And part of the work that they do in their writing teams or in their book clubs or in their math teams is to help each other stay on track and remember what it is that they're supposed to be doing. So I think that part of growing up in the developmental work of 9 and 10-year-olds is to learn how to take responsibility. And part of that is your schoolwork. So that's their job too. We're both in it together.